Woke Hollywood ruined superheroes, so now they're panic buying rights to video games. This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Hollywood, and of course, namely Disney, took superheroes as far as they could and then decided, you know what? It doesn't fit our propaganda enough. We need to push superheroes that are non-traditional superheroes. We need more female superheroes. We need more diverse superheroes. And the further and further they went from what the Marvel brand was all about, the quicker they destroyed the Marvel brand, resulting, of course, in the Marvels completely destroying Marvel's brand forever. In video games, it's been a little bit different. There has been success for video games in Hollywood, in movies, in TV. So now Hollywood, having completely destroyed superheroes, is moving as quickly as they can to option and acquire the rights to as many video games properties as they can. From Bloomberg, in Hollywood, video games are the new superheroes. Producers chase game rights in wake of Super Mario's and Last of Us. And they're not just going after the big game franchises. They're going after as many as they can find that they can get any kind of story out of. For example, when she first saw the email, Nadia Thorne thought it was a prank or maybe a student project. A Hollywood production company wanted to turn her video game into a movie. In addition to publishing comic books, I've also published some novelty books. One of them was called 500 Things My Cat Told Me. And I did a few series like that. Completely out of the blue, I got an email from somebody in Italy who is the publisher of the Harry Potter series in Italian, as they introduced themselves, and they said, hey, we want to get the rights to translate your cat book into Italian. And I said, this looks like a scam. But after a few emails back and forth, it turned out they were real. The same thing is going on with video game publishers right now. Thorne was one of the 4 people behind Dredge, an independently produced game that blends serene fishing with cosmic horror. Although Dredge received rave reviews when it came out in March 2023, it wasn't the type of high-profile property that might typically draw audiences to cinemas. But the requests kept coming, not from clueless amateurs, but from the companies behind blockbusters like Harry Potter and Star Trek. A few months later, Thorne and her team struck a deal with Story Kitchen, founded by the producers of Sonic the Hedgehog, to make a feature film based on Dredge. Quote, they seem to think it's going to go ahead, Thorne said. Apparently, all the major studios are excited. Moviegoers have begun to tire of superheroes after a deluge of comic book films, which is where we get the phrase superhero fatigue from. And we see that a lot in the industry, and we also see that in consumer publications. Superhero fatigue is where they're claiming, well, it's just been a few too many superheroes, and because you have too many of them, people aren't interested in them anymore, so we need to do less superhero movies. What they won't say is the Marvels, which wasn't just a bad movie, it was a terrible movie that was completely off-brand for Marvel, and it also made no sense narratively, killed the business for superhero movies. There will still be superhero movies. There are just going to be a lot less of them, and no one's ever going to love the Marvel brand the way they used to love the Marvel brand. It's just not possible. One of the things that makes video games so different from Marvel's movies is that even though Marvel Comics has been around for many, many decades, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of comics that are part of the Marvel Universe storyline, it really doesn't have a focused person who understands the Marvel characters properly, from a story perspective, from an editorial perspective. Stan Lee certainly knew what he wanted, but then after that, it was really only Jim Shooter that seemed to get and really care about the characters, that would say things like, look, we can't do this with Spider-Man because there are kids reading this. If we're going to do a superhero, we have to be really careful about having anti-heroes. Another thing Jim Shooter understood was that Marvel was a brand. And you could have different heroes and they could be different people with different stories, but they all needed to feel like they were part of a cohesive Marvel universe, a cohesive aesthetic of story and art. You could have differences, but a Marvel comic should always feel like a Marvel comic. But Jim Shooter left Marvel in the 1980s, and there hasn't been anyone in place that came anywhere close to understanding the importance of putting the entire storytelling package together correctly with story and artwork. Video games are different. There are passionate creative teams that work on these video games, whether it's a small game or a big game, and Hollywood, at least right now, is kind of being forced to pay attention to the details and do a good job on these adaptations. We haven't heard about any video game adaptations, whether it's TV or film, that have done really well but are nothing like the original game. Yet we have heard of multiple comic book movies that completely don't resemble what we loved about comic books when they really became successful, and people truly loved the Marvel Universe and read and collected the comic books. But we can't say the same thing for superhero movies. Superhero movies have completely missed the mark leading up to the last few years, especially with the Marvels. It's one thing to do a bad Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania movie, but the Marvels wasn't just about quality, it was just not a superhero movie. Hollywood, meanwhile, is looking to the video game industry as the next fertile ground for story ideas. Spurred by such hits as the Super Mario Bros. Movie, dozens of video game franchises have been optioned or produced for film and television over the last 2 years, from God of War to Grounded. Many of these adaptations are still in development, but the ones released have found success. Amazon's recent Fallout series, based on the post-apocalyptic games, has reached 65 million viewers, while the first 2 Sonic the Hedgehog films have grossed more than $700 million, with a third entry slated for later this year. It's a two-way street, Sarah Bond, president of Microsoft's Xbox division, said at the Bloomberg Technology Summit that the Fallout TV show is leading viewers to engage with the games. Hungry producers have gobbled up the options to both mega franchises and hit indie games such as Dredge and the detective role-playing game Disco Elysium. Even games with little to no name recognition have tantalized Hollywood, such as the ancient Sega action series Golden Axe and El Paso Elsewhere, a low-budget shooter that has been optioned by the actor Lakeith Stanfield. David A. Gross, author of the franchise Read Movie newsletter, said that even lesser-known video games are appealing to film and television producers because they have a narrative already established. Quote, Hollywood looks for new stories wherever they can be found, Gross said. Those games might not have much intellectual property asset value, but they still have potential. Video game adaptations were once a laughingstock thanks to campy 1990s films based on Super Mario Bros., Double Dragon, and Street Fighter. More recent movies such as 2010's Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time and 2016's Warcraft were commercially successful, largely due to overseas markets, but critically panned. Jake Gyllenhaal, who starred in Prince of Persia, later expressed regret about the experience. But the curse has been broken in recent years thanks to critical darlings such as Netflix's The Witcher, based on a series of Polish novels and video games, which recently began filming a 4th season. Of course, there are other controversies with The Witcher. Last year, HBO's The Last of Us became the first video game adaptation to rack up awards, receiving 24 Emmy nominations and winning 8. Quote, for many years, there was a belief supported by poor results that video games could not be successfully transformed into audience-satisfying and profitable films, said Adam Fogelson, chair of the film studio at Lionsgate Entertainment Corp., which will release a movie based on the video game series Borderlands this August. Recent hits, Fogelson said, quote, proved that with the right creative, a new generation was more than ready to embrace those characters and worlds in feature films. Prestige television in particular is fertile ground for video game adaptations because it allows for the type of side quests and exploration that make games appealing. While it might have been disastrous to cram the 15-hour story of The Last of Us into a 2-hour feature film, HBO's 9-hour series gave it room to breathe and allowed for diversions like Long Time, an episode that wasn't closely related to the overall story but was critically acclaimed. The historic failure of video game adaptations may have been largely due to a lack of respect for the source material, which has changed in recent years as filmmaking attracted new generations of people who grew up playing games rather than scoffing at them. This is interesting because you have creative people working on the films and TV shows who actually love and are familiar with the games. At Marvel, they have a rule. The rule is you can't work on the films or TV shows if you love the comics, because they don't want to just straight adapt the comics. That's Marvel's rule. Look at what's happened to the Marvel Universe and compare that with all of the successes now in video games. The power dynamic between the film and TV studios and the video games isn't completely with the film and TV studios. The video game people are not that anxious to make a deal that could destroy the value of their brand, because they still make and sell the video games. And if they do the TV show right, like with Fallout, they will sell a lot more video games, so everyone makes money. In comic books, no such luck. Todd Howard, director of multiple Fallout games and an executive producer on the television series, said in a recent interview that the show's production team was so meticulous about translating every little thing that the set designers even used 3D printers to reproduce art from the games. That appreciation was one of the biggest considerations for Thorne and her colleagues as they weighed multiple offers for turning Dredge into a film or television series. They found themselves impressed with Story Kitchen when one of its producers identified themes that they had explored early in the development of Dredge. "But we're going to be handing off our world, our story," Thorne said, adding she hoped they were partnering with a studio that really gets it. And from The Hollywood Reporter, video game Poppy Playtime getting movie treatment via Legendary. Don Murphy and Susan Montfort of Angry Films will produce the feature based on the game that has killer Toy Story and Gremlins vibes. This is one of the coolest video game-based films they're doing because they've got this character called Huggy Wuggy, which is just an absolutely great, fantastic, iconic name. Huggy Wuggy is like one of those once-in-a-lifetime names you can come up with. It's a great name. Huggy Wuggy has been called up by Hollywood. Beating out several competitive offers, Legendary has closed an aggressive deal with Mob Entertainment to develop and produce a live-action feature adaptation of Poppy Playtime, a horror video game featuring the toy-turned-monster. Legendary will develop and produce along with Mob Entertainment and Angry Films' Don Murphy and Susan Montfort, who recently finished filming horror movie Faces of Death for the company. Featuring shades of Willy Wonka, Toy Story, and Gremlins, the first-person video game sees the player acting as a former employee of a faded toy brand who, thanks to a cryptic letter, is drawn back to an abandoned facility only to quickly discover it has become a home to a host of toys, including Huggy Wuggy, Mommy Longlegs, another excellent name, and Catnap. Players have to decipher clues, solve puzzles, and use gadgets to unravel the mystery and get out alive. Mob, founded by brothers Zach and Seth Bellinger in 2015, produced and released the first chapter of the game on indie game platform Steam in 2021. It became a surprise hit, amassing over 12 million players across PC and mobile, and by the time the third chapter was made, it was being played on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch. The game also became an international merchandising phenomenon, with Huggy Wuggy plushies and other playthings spreading the world over. Poppy is the third project teaming Legendary with Murphy, one of the producers of the long-running Transformers franchise. On top of the new version of the VHS cult horror movie Faces of Death, Angry Films and Legendary are developing a multi-medium take on classic sci-fi title Buck Rogers. Angry Films is also developing an adaptation of 1980s comic Alien Legion at Warner Brothers. For Legendary, Poppy puts it into the video game adaptation space, a hot scene that runs the gamut from family film franchises such as Sonic the Hedgehog to elevated zombie fare such as HBO's The Last of Us. Yes, we know they're not zombies in The Last of Us, but it's definitely in the zombie genre. It also gives the company a potential franchise that could prove profitable if made smartly. And also from Bloomberg, Amazon's Fallout show is a fantastic video game adaptation. On the heels of last year's The Last of Us, it's a further indication the curse of games to screen is broken. And I've seen Fallout, it is a great adaptation. It's a very entertaining show. It's well done, people are watching it, people love it. There's nothing about the show that ruins the experience of the games. Unlike Disney that's gone so far out of their way to try to turn Marvel into what they want it to be for propaganda purposes, as opposed to what its fans want, as opposed to what decades of fans want. Just well-done stories that look and feel like they should be part of the Marvel Universe. Hollywood has an agenda to push, but when it comes down to it, they do want to make money. Even if it just means them being forced to do it, they will eventually change their content to match what people actually want to spend money on when it comes to going to the movie theater or watching when it comes to your TV. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.